We've just witnessed one of the strangest weeks in PlayStation history. It began with a $100 million game being taken offline just 2 weeks after release. Then, only 2 days later, Sony had a massive win with the launch of the long overdue Astro Bot, but by the following Tuesday there was yet another surprise. The $700 PlayStation 5 Pro, with no disk drive included at that price point, and the vertical stand sold separately. It makes sense that PlayStation's tagline no longer is for the players, since this series of ups and downs shows us there's some lack of direction. Whether it's a disconnect between the executives and what players truly want, the leftovers from Jim Ryan's leadership, or Sony getting arrogant again as Xbox struggles to compete in console sales. Whatever the reason, this was undeniably one of PlayStation's weirdest weeks. Let's begin with Concord. The worst thing about the fate of this game is that overall it doesn't look that bad. It's not a scam, nor is it a game plagued with performance issues or gameplay breaking bugs. It's also far from being the worst rated Sony first-party game. The gameplay may be a bit slow, but it's not unbearable. It was much more a case of the wrong type of game released at the worst possible time. Concord launched on August 23rd, but after poor sales and low player counts, Sony announced just 2 weeks later that the game would be taken offline, refunds would be issued, and it would be removed from stores. This created a unique situation. A few players managed to platinum the game and still get a refund for it. I'm not sure if anyone documented that in a video, but it's certainly something that we're unlikely to see again anytime soon. The lack of direction here is shown from the moment that Concord was pitched to Sony. At that very second, there should be someone there to point out that the hero shooter scene is too crowded. And with many games in the genre being free to play, a $40 price tag wouldn't make things any easier. But if it was too late to pull the plug on the game, perhaps shifting to a PvE format instead of a PvP could have made a difference. And especially the character design just looks too unremarkable, so an overhaul of the models could do wonders. The first time I saw the trailers, I genuinely mistook this as a spin-off to the Guardians of the Galaxy game. But they went ahead anyway, and even the overwhelmingly negative numbers during the free-to-play pre-launch days weren't enough to delay the game or change anything. And knowing how live service games work, with the need for constant updates and new content to stay relevant, they likely have months if not a full year of Planet updates that will probably never see the light of day. From a preservation perspective, I hope they find a way to bring it back, either as a free-to-play or in some other form, so all those years of work and planned updates aren't lost. Fortunately, we were about to see a step in the right direction. Just 3 days after Concord's offline announcement, Sony launched Astro Bot, a fantastic game that was long overdue. A game that feels like the PlayStation of the old days, with a great dose of nostalgia but in a refreshing way. My main issue is that by now, we shouldn't be looking at the first full Astro game in this generation. And I say that because the PlayStation 5 was released back in 2020 with Astro's Playroom included in it. And fine, it's more of a tech demo included in the system, but just from the number of people who played through all the 4 different worlds in the game, as well as the number of players who went for the platinum, they could clearly see that there was a demand for much more. A company more aligned with its players would have delivered the full Astro game much earlier, and as glad as I am to have Astro Bot right now, by the 4th year of the PS5, we should be playing Astro Bot 2 and looking forward to the next one. And I understand that they really want to have a few successful live services, but it doesn't mean they can't make fun platformers or action adventures that don't take themselves too seriously. And the money saved from cancelling Concord or avoiding that failure altogether could have boosted the development of more games like that. Ever since the huge successes of Uncharted and The Last of Us, the PlayStation formula became a cinematic, story-driven, cutscene-heavy game that takes itself seriously, but there is a huge demand for the PlayStation games of old. Nintendo is doing quite well without turning Mario into a slightly depressed character or making a highly scripted and cutscene-heavy Zelda. It's about time to give us a new Ape Escape, Sly Cooper, and Jak and Daxter, games that give us more of the PlayStation aura of the 90s and early 2000s, and I hope the widely positive reception of Astro Bot serves as a strong signal that we want more of it. But now, let's talk about things we don't want. Just 4 days after Astro Bot's launch, on the following Tuesday, Sony officially announced the PlayStation 5 Pro, and I made a video about the leaks 5 days earlier, and looking back, I think I was too kind. It's a console that feels unnecessary in this underwhelming generation, that has the same CPU and a GPU that is about 45% faster. And when we look back at the PS4 Pro, it had a reason to exist, namely 4K TVs, and its GPU was twice as fast as the base model, but it was priced at $400 and had a disk drive included. But fine, let's take it as a product that does have a certain demand. The presentation itself did a poor job of highlighting the improvements. They used old games, including lots of cross-gen games, which shows how unnecessary it is, and they were just not great at showing all the benefits. In contrast, Digital Foundry did a much better job in its coverage than PlayStation itself in its official video. They also spent time on stuff like the crispness of the crowds in the background or the foliage when you're running by, and maybe I've just played video games wrong all my life, but I don't tend to focus on how clear the distant details and the procedural cars look. This comparison showing how blurry Final Fantasy Rebirth looks on the amateur model versus how crispy it looks on the professional would be a better example, but I still don't think it justifies the price increase. Also, when you think of a pro version of a product, you expect it to include everything the base model has and more. When we look at the iPhone Pro, it adds features on top of what the base model already has. But unlike the amateur OG PlayStation 5, the professional model doesn't come with a disk drive by default, and there's more, the vertical stand is also sold separately. The price tag is the icing on the cake. $700, which turns into $800 if you ask the disk drive and the stand, and that gets even worse if you are in Europe, and I don't even want you to think about how much it's going to cost in Brazil. Now let's think about what it says about PlayStation's direction. First, we could say that this generation could very well go without a Pro model, or if they really wanted to release a different version, a PlayStation 5 Lite to compete in price with the Series S and the Switch 2 would be more interesting and novel. And the data showing that 70% of players use the performance mode instead of fidelity shows that console gamers care more about a smooth gameplay experience rather than counting pixels or looking at how crisp the foliage is. But I think the worst part is the lack of a disk drive by default. And whether you care about physical media or not, this move towards digital-only consoles where the disk drive is an afterthought will only take extra options away from us. We'll no longer be able to buy used copies or trade games, which is rather ironic when you think about the early PlayStation 4 days and how Sony made fun of Xbox for seemingly going into that direction. It also pushes us into a future where games can simply be turned offline and made irrelevant or even removed from our digital library. And as I finish this video, it seems like Sony is about to give us 2 remasters that no one asked for. One of those is Horizon Zero Dawn, which already looks great on PlayStation 5 and even better on PC. The other, according to Jeff Grubb, is even less exciting than Horizon and will be shown on the next State of Play. Which I guess really encapsulates the series of bad decisions. But looking back on those 7 days between Concord's offline notice and the PS5 Pro announcement, it paints a picture of a company that is both capable of delivering a great and well-anticipated game, yet still out of touch with the wants and needs of its player base. And that kinda makes us wonder where PlayStation is headed. Hopefully on the next PlayStation showcase, they'll be able to show new games that actually highlight the power of the PS5 Pro and the PSSR technology. But I hope the price tag is not Sony testing the waters for the PlayStation 6 launch and that physical media won't disappear anytime soon. When decisions seem to prioritize corporate interests over delivering what most of the public actually wants, we have to question the direction that PlayStation is heading. That's not to say that PlayStation is doomed or anything like that, because that wouldn't be true, but they have a rich history that we would like to see better explored. Not just with expensive anniversary products in PS1 colors that scalpers will quickly snatch, but with games that reminds us what PlayStation really stands for, like Astro Bot, and not simply following trends just for corporate sake. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leave a like and a comment. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.